It all began with a simple, persistent notification on my phone screen. A tiny green bird reminding me that it was time for my daily lesson. At that moment, I was just another soul, lost in the gray labyrinth of a modern, secular city. My life was a series of checkboxes. Wake up, drink coffee, answer emails, scroll through meaningless news feeds, and sleep. I felt a profound, quiet ache in my chest, a sense of stagnation that I couldn't quite name. I wasn't looking for God. I was looking for a distraction. I chose to learn Arabic, not out of any spiritual calling, but because I was fascinated by the visual geometry of its script. I wanted to master something difficult, something that looked like art on a page. In those first few weeks, it was purely a digital game. I would sit on the subway, my headphones on, matching sounds to those elegant, sweeping curves. The house is big. The boy is drinking water. It was mechanical, a way to kill 20 minutes of my commute. But as I moved past the introductory levels, the algorithm of the app began to shift. It started introducing words that didn't just describe objects, but seemed to describe the very fabric of human existence. They weren't just labels. They were vessels. I remember the very first time I encountered the word Sabr. The app translated it as patience. In my native tongue, patience was a passive, almost annoying thing. It was what you did while waiting for a slow computer to restart. But the cultural notes embedded in the app explained Sabr differently. It described it as a beautiful perseverance, a steadfastness of the heart that remains firm even when the world is shaking. I found myself staring at that word for an hour. I wasn't just learning a vocabulary item, I was being introduced to a philosophy of resilience that I desperately needed. I started whispering it to myself during high-stress meetings, feeling its rhythmic weight. Sabr, Sabr. It felt like a cool, steady hand placed on a fevered brow. As my streak on the app grew, so did my internal transformation. I was no longer hunting for points or trophies. I was hunting for those specific, crystalline words that seemed to unlock hidden chambers in my heart. I encountered the word shukur. The app said gratitude, but the example showed it wasn't just a polite thank you. It was an active, radical recognition of every microscopic blessing, the clarity of a glass of water, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the tilt of the sun. I began to practice shukr in my gray apartment, and suddenly the grayness started to fade. I realized that my previous life was a desert of taking for granted, and this language was teaching me how to bloom. Then came the evening that truly cracked my world open. I was sitting on my balcony, the city lights blurring into a cold neon haze. A translation exercise popped up on my screen. It was a short, rhythmic sentence that felt different from any travel or business phrase I had learned. I had to translate. Fa inna ma'al usri yusra. I typed the English equivalent provided. For indeed, with hardship will be ease. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The app didn't say, after hardship comes ease. It said, with it, simultaneously. It suggested that at the very heart of the storm, the stillness is already present, that the medicine is woven into the wound itself. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, a sudden, violent loosening of a knot I had carried since childhood. I closed the app and sat in the dark for hours. I realized then that I wasn't just learning a language used by millions of people. I was being spoken to by a voice that knew my specific, individual pain. Driven by a new, almost frantic hunger, I began to bypass the standard lessons. I started researching the sources of these phrases. I discovered they weren't just cultural idioms. They were verses from the Quran. I had grown up in a society that taught me to be suspicious of that book, to view it through a lens of fear and otherness. But the words I was discovering through my phone were the most tender, psychologically sophisticated, and intellectually honest concepts I had ever encountered. I learned the word Rahma. The app translated it as mercy, but my research into the linguistic roots, a logic I found absolutely mesmerizing, revealed that it came from the same root as the word for womb, Ram. Mercy wasn't just a legalistic pardon from a distant judge. It was an all-encompassing, nurturing, protective love, the kind of love that surrounds an unborn child. I wept when I realized this. I felt like I was being invited into a relationship with the divine that was based not on an angry fear, but on an overwhelming, maternal-like protection. For a woman who had spent her life feeling abandoned, the word Rahma felt like a home. My curiosity transformed into a full-scale spiritual investigation. I began to study the root system of the language. In my language, words are often isolated islands, but in Arabic, everything is connected. From 3 simple letters, KTB, come a book, a library, a writer, a desk, a prescription, and a destiny. This linguistic interconnectedness began to mirror my changing worldview. I realized that nothing in my life was accidental. My loneliness, my boredom, my decision to download that specific app, it was all part of a grander, more beautiful writing. I started learning the names of the creator. Al-Latif, the subtly kind, who works in ways too delicate for the human eye to see. Al-Wadud, the most loving, whose love is active and constant. I found myself practicing my pronunciation in the shower, not to pass a level, but because saying these names felt like a physical cleansing. I was a secular skeptic, a product of a world that worships logic and data, but the grammar of this language was dismantling my defenses brick by brick. One night, a lesson appeared on the word qalb, meaning heart. The app's linguistic note explained that the word comes from the root to flip, or to turn. The heart is called qalb because it is the most volatile part of a human. It is constantly turning, constantly changing its state. It was so profoundly, scientifically true. My own heart had been turning for months, guided by the very words I was typing into my phone. I wasn't just learning a new way to speak. I was learning a new way to exist. The climax of my journey arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after I first downloaded the app. I reached a level focused on fundamental beliefs. I had to translate the Shahada, La ilaha illallah. I typed the words slowly, my fingers trembling over the glass screen. There is no God but God. As I hit the check button and the app gave its happy digital chime of success, I felt a shock go through my body. I realized I wasn't lying. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't being cynical or ironic. I believed what I was typing. I wasn't just completing a module for a certificate. I was testifying to a truth that my soul had recognized long before my mind did. The screen of my phone, which used to be a source of distraction and anxiety, had become a mirror reflecting my true self. I realized that I had been a Muslim in spirit for months, led there by the breadcrumbs of vocabulary and the logic of grammar. The strangeness of the Arabic script had become the only thing that felt familiar. I didn't want to just translate these words anymore. I wanted to be defined by them. The transition from the digital to the physical was the most terrifying step. A week after that final lesson, I stood at the entrance of a local mosque. I felt like an imposter, a girl who had only learned Islam through an algorithm. But as soon as I stepped inside and heard the voices of women greeting each other with Assalamu alaikum, the very phrase I'd practiced 1,000 times in my bedroom, the fear vanished. I felt a wave of sakina, tranquility, another word I had learned, wash over me. It was the ease that had been promised with my hardship. I approached the imam, my voice small and shaking. I told him I had learned his language through an app, and in doing so, I had accidentally found his God. He didn't laugh. He smiled with a deep, knowing kindness that made me feel like he had been waiting for me. I stood before the small community, and without the help of a screen, a hint, or an algorithm, I recited the words that had become my lifeline. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. When the words left my lips, I felt a literal weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just a girl who knew a bit of a difficult language. I was a human being who had finally found the manual for her own soul. People often ask me about my conversion story. They expect a tale of a miraculous dream, a dramatic debate with a scholar, or a life-changing trip to a distant land. They are always stunned when I tell them, I just wanted to learn a language to pass the time. But I know the truth. It wasn't just any language. It was a journey through the very architecture of truth. It was a path that used technology to lead me back to the ancient. I still have that app on my phone. The little green bird still pops up to remind me of my lessons. I still do them every day, because learning never ends. But now, when I see the words on the screen, I don't see foreign characters. I see the map that led me out of the darkness. I see the vocabulary of my heart. I started this journey wanting to add a skill to my resume, but I ended it by finding a reason to breathe. I found the creator in the grammar. I found peace in the punctuation. And for the first time in my life, I am no longer lost in translation. I am exactly where I was always meant to be,